Hello, everybody. You've tuned into the Early Years Development Show with me, Lucy from Rhythm Time. In today's episode, I sit down with Faye from Little Dreams. Faye is a sleep consultant, and we talk all things sleep for children as young as 4 months old, all the way to sleeping in a bed. So it's a great episode. We've got so many tips, so many hints, so many things that I didn't even know. She also answers your Instagram questions, so make sure you stay tuned. It's a good one.
Ha ha ha, he he he, you are here and so are we. Ha ha ha, he he he, you are here and so are we.
Right, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, Faye. We've had so many people really kind of interested in this topic, so thank you so much. We're really looking forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Okay, let's just get into it. Let's talk a little bit about your journey, and can you share how you came to start Little Dreams and the background behind Little Dreams?
Yeah, of course. So back in the company was founded in 2016 by Jenna Wilson, who's my business partner. So she was a childcare solicitor, and she has 3 children now. But when she had her middle child, she went back to work, realised she didn't really love being a solicitor anymore, and was looking for something else. Came across an advert for some sleep consulting training, and long story short, decided to go for it. Kind of did a bit of law and a bit of sleep consulting alongside each other while she had her third child, and then fully went into Little Dreams after the birth of her third child. So 2016 is like the official kind of time where we were, you know, going full blast. I came on board in 2018, so I was a social worker specializing in mental health for a long time prior to meeting Jenna. We met through a mutual friend who had been a client of Jenna's, and then become a friend, and she was a friend of mine who, and so obviously her child hadn't slept and Jenna had helped her. I had my second child, and similar to Jenna, realized that I'd kind of fallen out of love with social work, and it wasn't really, I didn't feel like I was helping anyone anymore. Even though that was what I really wanted to do. And that's why I went into social work. And I just felt that actually I was unable to do that. My caseload was really high. I also have 2 children. By this point, I had 2 children of my own. My husband's in the military, so he's away all the time. And I just was looking for something else where I could help families, but be there for my own family. So met Jenna through a friend of a friend. We hit it off straight away. I went to work with her in Bristol, which is where like the original Little Dreams was founded. And it's just grown since then. So we grew. We took on 2 more sleep consultants just within Bristol, and then we were still getting calls for help from all over the UK. So we thought, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to grow this even more? So we decided to franchise, and the franchise launched officially in December 21. So we've been going for almost 3 years now, coming up to 3 years, and we have consultants from kind of over towards Essex, right up to Birmingham is our, I say right up to, Birmingham is our furthest north at the moment, and right down to kind of Bristol, Bath, Swindon, and a few areas in between.
Oh, wow. And I guess although you're in those areas, you cover all over really because of the way that you can kind of do it virtually.
Yeah, so our franchisees work within their territories and support the families within those territories. But yeah, we get calls for help all over the world. I've worked with families in New Zealand. We've worked with families in various places in Europe, the Middle East. Yeah, we can work with anyone. The internet is obviously very useful for that.
Very much so. So, just taking it really right back to basics for anybody listening at home, what actually is a sleep consultant?
Mm. So we work with children or little ones from kind of 4 months up to 10 years, and our sleep consult, that's the kind of age range that our sleep consultancy works with. But very basically, a sleep consultant is someone who can help you to identify why your little one might not be sleeping particularly well, and make realistic changes to encourage the little one to sleep more and to have more consolidated sleep. So it's there's a lot of misinformation or opinion out there that sleep consultants just encourage little ones to cry themselves to sleep. And from our point of view, that is absolutely not what we do. We're very baby or child led, and we work really collaboratively with the family to find a solution that works for everybody. But in a nutshell, we help children and babies to sleep better.
Sounds very good, and probably something that I needed when my little girl was little.
So many people say that. I can't tell you, everywhere we go, they're like, oh, I wish I'd known about you. Get grandmas come up to us. I wish I'd known about you. And, I wish there was something like this around, 50 years ago. And yeah, it's and because we are every year we're sort of busier and busier, it's obviously something that's becoming more and more mainstream. And also I think there's a lot of pressure on mums, especially now that we have to go back to work. So perhaps in the past, generations ago, where there wasn't that pressure and it didn't matter as much if people weren't getting as much sleep, but it seems to be more of a contributing factor to maternal well-being now. So I think it's becoming more mainstream from that regard.
Absolutely. And I think there's probably this misconception as well that people think, well, I thought that, oh, that's really, really expensive and really extreme thing to do. And oh, I don't need that. It's almost like you feel like you might be failing because your child's not sleeping, and kind of having that, admitting that can be not very, you don't want to do it. So it's nice to know that you're kind of out there and you're covering all of these mums that almost feel the same.
Yeah, and I think one of the most common things we hear is phrases like, why didn't we do this sooner? Best money we've ever spent. You've changed our lives. And it's such a short space of time that we work with a family for, 2-3 weeks, depending on the age of the child. And in that time, it can make such a big difference to families. It can't be underestimated. And we always say to anybody who's listening that if what you're doing with your little one's sleep works for you and everybody's getting enough sleep and everyone's happy, then just do you, do what works for you. We are there if things aren't sustainable anymore and you are struggling. We work with mums who have postnatal depression and anxiety, and not solely those mums, but there are mums out there who are really struggling, and sleep deprivation is a massive trigger for that. Obviously my background coming from mental health, I know that it's a fact that sleep deprivation can be a huge contributing factor to poor mental health. It can affect your relationships with your spouse. It can affect how you work. It can affect it can affect your, we work with school age children who are really struggling in school because they're just not getting enough consolidated sleep. So many different factors that come into play.
I can imagine. You mentioned that you've got children yourself. Have you had any personal sleep issues or situations that you can really kind of relate to these mums?
Yeah, so my eldest was what we call in Little Dreams a unicorn baby. So she was one of these babies who, I didn't do anything to make this happen, but she slept through the night from about 8 weeks old. And I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything to make that happen. And I remember thinking, like, this is easy. Like, what is everybody complaining about? Like, I'm getting all this sleep. Like, it was brilliant. And I just felt like, looking back on it, I was very lucky, because that is, we call them the unicorn babies for that reason. Yeah, very rare. Yes. But it does happen. And like I say, I didn't do anything to make it happen. I didn't leave her to cry it out. I didn't do it. She was just one of those. She's still a very laid back child. That is her personality. So I was in this bubble of, oh, this is easy. I could do this again. And then my son came along. Um, and my son is not a unicorn baby. He's very fabulous in his own way, but he's not a unicorn. He was what I would call a typical baby in terms of sleep. He really struggled with his sleep, which is normal. And now I know that I can feel, I find it easier to relate to parents who are in that newborn stage, because it is normal. When it becomes abnormal is when you're kind of 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 18 months in and you're still not getting any sleep at night. Now, I sort of chose to make changes about 6 months because I knew I was going back to work. My husband is away. I had at this point a very active 3.5-year-old who, so I couldn't just get my head down when my son was napping. Not that he did nap very well, but I just couldn't do it. And I remember it culminated in 2 points. One was I went to a soft play with a friend with my youngest in a car seat. I pulled him out the car. He was asleep, which was very rare. I put the car seat down in the soft play. My daughter went off playing with her friend, and my other friend was there. And I curled up on one of those sofas that are in a lot of soft plays, and I just went to sleep. And I must have slept for about an hour and a half. And you know how mental those soft plays are with like the music and the children screaming and everything. And I just was out for the count. And my friend was there, obviously, and I woke up and she had the baby, and she was like, "Just go back to sleep, it's fine." And I didn't care that I was asleep on a sofa in the middle of this. I was like, I'll take my sleep when I can get it. And then another point, and then very probably a similar time, I'd been up it felt like I don't think I actually slept, and I've been up every 45 minutes by myself because my husband is away a lot. And I went down to my parents for some respite, but it was still me. I was still feeding, so it was still me. And I woke up in the morning. I say woke up. I got up in the morning with him and went to the kitchen, and my dad was like, "You look like death." He was like, "You honestly look. Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm not okay. I'm really not okay." And that was when I decided to do something about it. And I read everything there was to read in the space of when I was down at my parents'. I had this sort of week of respite, and I took that time to read and read and read and read, and felt like I needed to take in everything so I could make this situation better. And I just implemented a lot of different things that I'd read, and I made loads of tweaks. And I, like I said, I was lucky I had my parents there to sort of help with my daughter. And gradually over a couple of weeks, I started to see improvements, to the point where I wasn't, I was only waking up once or twice in the night, not every hour. And he was starting to nap a bit better during the day because I had no idea. I didn't really, because I'd had this unicorn baby, I didn't really know. I was like, why are you awake all the time? Like, what's going on? And he would only nap for like 20 minutes at a time. So I was like, he was so tired and grumpy, and it was just unsustainable. So I made all these tweaks and I did loads of things, and I kind of felt very pleased with myself that I'd managed to get him sleeping better. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, this, and I felt like I'd come out of this fog and could enjoy what was left of my maternity leave. And then I think that's probably when I was chatting to my friend, mine and Jenna's mutual friend, and I was like, this is amazing. I really want to help people. And she was like, oh, we got a sleep consultant. And I was like, why did I not know you had a sleep consultant? I can't believe you were struggling that much that you had a sleep consultant and you couldn't tell anyone, or you felt that you couldn't tell anyone. And B, let me meet this person because I need to meet her. And so we did. And that's, yeah, basically how we ended up where we are today. So I'm thankful for my poor sleeper, who is now an absolute trooper, by the way. Sleeps amazing.
So what is the biggest misunderstanding parents have about children's sleep?
So I do think there is a lot of opinion out there in social media, not just social media, but also well-meaning grandparents and, people like that who are like, oh, you should do this and you should do that, and this worked for me and this worked for that. Every baby is different. So what works for one will not work for another. And we say that even with the job now. So our sleep plans are completely bespoke because I can have 2 1-year-olds who don't sleep particularly well, who I write, because of their problems are similar on paper. The sleep plan might be fairly similar in terms of what we're going to do and the timings and things like that. But when we get started, they go down 2 different paths because every baby or child is different, and that comes down to personality, genetics, all of these things. So everyone's different. So I think a lot of parents think they just overrun with information. They're like, I don't know what to do. I've tried this, I've tried that, I've tried the other. The reality is that's probably only one of those things would have worked or had the potential to work, but you need to do them for a good 2 or 3 weeks to see how you can implement them and make changes. the reality is most parents are on their knees by this point, so they do it for a night and they're like, that didn't work, so let's try something else. And then the other big kind of misconception is that it's not a misconception, but people I think, well, babies just don't sleep. Well, yeah, they don't when they're newborns. Like newborns actually do sleep quite a lot. They do sleep when they're genuine newborns. They do sleep quite a lot. But there's this this kind of thought process out there of like, well, I became a mum, therefore I should have known that I'm not going to get any sleep. Of course your sleep is going to be interrupted when you have a child. Like I have two older children who sleep very well now, because that I'd be awful at my job if they didn't. I still don't sleep like I did before I had children. Like I'm on high alert a lot of the time, even though I don't need to be. But as soon as one of them makes a noise, I'm like, I'm awake, I'm up. So you do kind of give up your sleep when you have children to a degree. But there is a kind of understand, we speak to a lot of parents of, you know 18, 19 month olds who are like, well, I just, they don't sleep very well, but they're only a baby. And I'm like, well, they're a toddler now. Like you are allowed to have a bit of sleep now. Like that's okay. And like I say, if you're okay with that, great, like fine. But if you're not, then there's absolutely things we can do to make improvement to sleep. So I think there is this, like I say, people almost get stuck in this newborn way of thinking of, well, of course they're going to wake up a lot during the night, and of course they are going to wake up a lot during the night. That doesn't necessarily need to be the case the older they get. The more kind of resilient they get, and I mean that in terms of they can tolerate longer periods awake during the day. So as they get older, so their awake windows need to be changed in order to make sure that they've got the right amount of sleep pressure when they're going down to sleep and things like that. The more, as they get sort of 6-7 months plus, when they start having some solids, like there's all of these things that change. And yet a lot of parents get stuck in this newborn, well, it's normal for them to wake up a lot during the night. um it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. And I'm not talking about newborns, I'm talking about old, 4 months plus, when they're a little bit more resilient.
So would you say 4 months is when you start the sleep training as such?
Yeah, and also sleep is not predictable before 4 months, because, and I'm sure all parents will know what will have heard of what I'm about to say, but the 4 month sleep regression. So the 4 month sleep regression is a developmental stage that all babies go through. And it's when we develop our sleep cycles, basically. So before that point, before 4 months, babies kind of take the sleep as and when they need it. So they'll take, like, and when I say that, I mean the type of sleep that they have. So we have REM and non-REM sleep in very basic terms. So deep sleep and light sleep. And deep sleep, non-REM sleep, is when we it's like a very physical sleep in terms of our bodies kind of concentrate on what it needs to do to grow, repair, all of that type of thing. So it's almost like a very, very unconscious deep sleep. And then we also have light sleep, which is REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, and that's when you process things. So your brain is very active and you're processing things that you've done the day before, learned the day before, especially important for babies and children. But it's lighter, so you're more likely to wake up from that type of sleep. You're more of a conscious level. So when you go through the 4 month sleep regression, so when babies are newborn pre 4 months, they kind of, your body will prioritize the type of sleep it needs as and when it needs it. So it will take like a bit of deep sleep here, a bit of light sleep here, a bit of this, a bit of that, and it will do what it needs to do. And you often see it with babies, out and about in really busy places, completely, like, newborn babies completely dead to the world on mum's shoulder, because their body's like, I need to grow here, so I'm just going to have a little bit of deep sleep. And then you see it when babies are a bit more alert, and they're sort of shoved, maybe in their pram having a sleep, and they're kind of a bit more active, or they jerk themselves awake because they're kind of a bit lighter sleep. So the body will kind of take the sleep as and when it needs it. When you get to the 4 month point, and we say 4 months, it's anywhere between 3 and 5 months really, but it's called the 4 months regression. It's not really a regression because it's a developmental leap. So they go through it, and it's when their sleep cycles develop. So instead of having this random kind of sleep of deep and light when you need it, it becomes more of a predictable pattern. So the body will go to sleep at the beginning of the night when melatonin is at its highest for a deep period of sleep. So for like 3 hours, 2-3 hours, and then it will have that. So the body will be, very, very low, deep under kind of a conscious level, and then it starts to come up to a more of a lighter sleep. And then these sleep cycles, these REM sleep cycles, are roughly for a baby between 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the baby. And then those sleep cycles will continue for the rest of the night, pretty much. So when we speak to parents who are, maybe 5-month olds, they'll say they slept okay, like when they were a baby. Like, yes, they were awake for a feed maybe twice a night, but actually, other than that, it was, they'd have consolidated sleep either side and it felt okay. And then suddenly, and I can just, and I'm like, I know exactly what they're about to say. And they'll describe this pattern of, and now they're awake every 45 minutes in the night. And it's okay when we put them to bed and then we go downstairs and have our dinner. And then when we go to bed, they start waking up. But that's because they've had that deep stage of sleep. When you're downstairs having your dinner, you go to bed and they start waking up every hour during the night, because those sleep cycles are shorter, and they are going to come to a more of a conscious level in between those sleep cycles. So that is kind of like a really common thing that parents ring us with. So understanding that 4-month regression and what's happening can really help parents to understand why it suddenly started happening.
Absolutely. And are there things that you advise parents to perhaps implement from this 4-month stage to make, when they're in the more conscious sleep, like quiet, dark, that type of thing?
Yeah. So although we don't work officially with babies under 4 months, because, like I say, everything's so unpredictable, we do offer an antenatal package, which I'll talk about later. But the point of that antenatal package is to talk to parents in depth about what we've just talked about, and loads of other things as well, so that parents understand what's happening in those early days of sleep. And there's some things that you can put in place, really basic things, from an early age, to kind of combat that 4-month regression having an impact. Because some babies will go through it and sail through it, and doesn't make any difference to their sleep. They might still wake up once or twice for a feed, or they might not, but they're not waking constantly. What we often find is the issue with little, or with families that contact us when they are waking really regularly, is because they're being helped to sleep every single time they go back to sleep. So they're having something done to them to get them to go to sleep. So they wake up and they're like, oh, where am I? This isn't where I was. I was on mummy's chest, or I was being rocked, or I was in daddy's arms, whatever it is. And then they wake up and they've been transferred into the cot, and they're like, oh, this isn't where I was when I went to sleep. Help me. You come back, you do it again. And so the cycle continues throughout the night. But yeah, so in that antenatal package, we talk a lot about some very basic things you can do from very early days, and things like, you know, making a difference between day and night, making sure it's dark at night, because babies are not scared of the dark. I should have said that's another common misconception. Little ones aren't scared of the dark until they're much older. So sort of 2.5, 3, when their imagination starts to kick in, that's when they can start to be like, oh, there's things in my room, or that's dark. Like, babies are not scared of the dark. And actually, the darker you can make it, the better, because you don't want to stimulate them during the night. You want them to be nice and peaceful. So you don't need night lights. You don't need mobiles. You don't need any of that stuff. Just make it dark. And so yeah. So daytime, obviously, with a newborn and young babies, the advice is that you keep them with you for sleep situations, so you don't like put them down in their own room until they're kind of 6 months old. So in the daytime, you can still make either, when they're a newborn, the reality is they're not going to have much energy for anything other than waking up, having a feed, having a nappy change, and then they're going to go back to sleep again. Like, that's the reality. But as they get slightly older, you could put them down in a Moses basket, in a kind of darkened sort of area in the where you are. But you do need to have it from an early days. If you can make a difference between day and night, it will really help them to regulate their circadian rhythm, because they don't really have that when they're born. It's kind of all over the place. So you want to encourage that, like, hustle and bustle of daytime life during the day, nice and peaceful and dark at night, just to help set their body clock, really.
That makes sense. That's a really good tip, and things that, as you say, they're quite simple tips, but you probably wouldn't think about, especially when you go online and you see things left, right, and centre. And as you say before, grandparents are saying, "This is what I did in the old days," and this is what, yeah. So it's quite good to kind of step back and have these simple tips, I suppose, to follow.
Yeah, it's just like really from in the antenatal package, we talk about day and night. We talk about awake windows. So again, I quite often see parents. I might go to a bit mother and baby group to chat about sleep, and there'll be like parents with like I don't know 8-week olds, and they're like they just don't sleep during the day. And I look at them, and this baby is like completely and utterly wired because it's so tired, and poor mum doesn't know what to do to get them to go to sleep because they won't go to sleep. But it's a bit of a vicious cycle, because the less sleep they get, the more likely they are to be able to go to sleep, because they've got so much adrenaline in their system from keeping them awake. So actually just little things like keeping an eye on their awake windows when they're first born, they can only really manage like 45 minutes awake when they're first born. So giving them the opportunity to sleep at the end of a feed, having a feed and then a nappy change, and then letting them go back to sleep, whether that's in a sling or whatever it is, allowing them that opportunity to go back to sleep can really help keep on top of that overtiredness.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier about sleep plans and that Little Dreams is not cry it out. What would you say your approach is?
So all of our approaches that we use various different approaches depending on the issues that the little one has, also depending on the parents, because lots of parents have different parenting styles. So we send out a questionnaire when we first work, when we before we work with a family, and that's kind of like 60 questions long, so it gives us a lot of information about the baby and the family and the environment and routine and all of these things. From that information, we write a sleep plan using one of our methods that we think would be the most appropriate for that family. But all of our methods would be like parent present approaches, so we don't leave little ones alone to cry themselves to sleep. It's really difficult for parents to do that, and if you're going to get a parent who's going to do cry it out, they wouldn't come to us. They'd be like, right, I'm going to follow this method, and I'm going to do it, and I'm just going to do it. So they wouldn't come to us. So we know that our parents need something more gentle, and that's what we offer.
Mm-hmm. And I think cry it out is, as you say, it's actually very distressing. I tried it one night, well, 3 hours maybe, and it's just not for me. And as you say, I think you can, having all these questions, these 60 questions, not only do you get an idea about the child, but also the parent and how they parent and that style. So I guess that's really important to take into consideration.
Yeah, and we talk a lot to the parents before we even go down the route of sending out a questionnaire about, what are, there's a few things that we need to kind of go through with parents to make sure that they can commit to it for those 2 weeks, because it is hard. Like even if even though we don't leave little ones to cry, you're making changes to something that you've been doing for however long. And so it can be tough for the family to do that. And that's why, again, you asked earlier, like, what is a sleep consultancy? We're there to help with those, like help hold your hand, almost, not physically, but, emotionally, hold your hand through making those changes and reassure you and make the tweaks that we need to keep everything as bespoke as possible for that child. Because that one baby will react vastly differently to another baby when it comes to making changes to anything. It's the same as us as people. Some of us handle change very well, others don't handle it very well at all. And every baby's different as well.
Yeah. So I guess it's important to probably note that there will be tears, but a lot more of a gentle approach.
Well, that's the only way that babies can communicate. They can't go, excuse me, don't really, what you're doing, not really sure about that. They're going to cry. We do everything we can to limit that crying, and we wouldn't leave a little one alone to deal with that crying.
And I guess the same with like if they have jabs or if they're not very well and things like that, it can really affect their sleep, but it's not actually the sleep that's the issue. Okay, that's interesting. How do you deal with the guilt and the pressure that the parents feel? I bet that's quite a big thing.
Yeah, it is. And I was talking to somebody this morning about this. It's us. So we do a lot of work with our consultants around working with the families, and I say mums, it's dads as well, but it is tends to be the mums who feel it more. I've had some mums who are absolutely hardcore, and like, you know, they'll kind of be able to follow the plan to the letter because they can kind of, they're like, I just need to do this. And it might be dad that struggles with it. That's, you know, so I don't want to generalize, but generally it is mums that struggle a little bit more. They often feel a lot of guilt when they come to us. I speak to crying mums on a daily basis, I would say. Not necessarily mums that I'm actually working with, but mums that are thinking about getting some support, because they feel, like you say, that they're a failure for having to ask for support, and you know, they never thought they'd be in that situation. They thought that they would be able to just manage it. So basically it starts off with a lot of empathy. I have been there before, but all of our consultants have worked with hundreds of families that have been, it's not, you're not alone, it's you, this is a really big issue, and lots of mums are struggling with it. We're there as sleep consultants to initially offer that listening ear, listen to what's going on, be honest about whether we can help, because there will be some situations where it might not be appropriate for us to work with the family. For instance, if they are a co-sleeping family who want to carry on co-sleeping because that's what they want, great, but they don't want the child to wake up a lot during the night, but they want to carry on co-sleeping. Well, it, that's not really realistic in terms of a child's sleep pattern. If they go to sleep with mummy or daddy next to them, and mummy or daddy roll over in the middle of the night or get up to go for a wee, it's probably going to wake them up. So we can't stop that from happening. So in those instances where parents are like, look, I can't cope with this, but I want to carry on doing this, or I'm not quite ready to make that move yet, then we'll give them as much advice as we can, but it wouldn't be fair to start something that wouldn't be successful at that point. So it would give us like an honest opinion in terms of whether we think we can help the family. But in terms of day to day dealing with any guilt that they're feeling, it's about reassurance. Everything that we do is evidence based. We give our families a lot of research before they decide whether they want to go ahead. So they'll have read the actual research, not the opinion pieces on social media. They'll have read the scientific research, of which there is a lot, and it's fascinating to read. And so generally when people are coming to us, they're coming from a place of having that knowledge and that understanding, which really helps then to mitigate any kind of, doesn't get rid of the guilt altogether, and they'll still find it difficult and they'll still be emotional, but they have an education around why they're doing it.
Absolutely, I think that's important, and I think you touched on a really good point there, that they're not alone, and so many mums are going, or parents I should say, are going through this, but it's just probably not spoken about enough, because it's almost a bit taboo, isn't it? They think you don't want to talk about that side of things, you just want to make out that you're getting on okay and it's all okay. So I think that's really important. You mentioned there reading up and things. Is that something you would advise, say, like a pregnant lady to do, just to because you don't always think about it, but would that be a good thing to do, to read up on all this research and things before you have the baby?
Again, it depends on, like, there's so much out there, you don't want to overwhelm yourself too much. Some parents, we find you've got different types of parents, we're all different. Some parents are like, knowledge is power, I need to know everything, give me everything to read and I'll digest it, and whatever. Other parents are like, I'm in my baby bubble and I don't want anything to ruin that. Either of those is fine. um you know it depends on your parenting approach and your personality, in terms of, because I think, had I, with my first, been given loads to read, I would have found that quite overwhelming, and probably wouldn't have known what to take and what not to take. I think when you have your second, you're a little bit more like, right, like, I've learned from the first, I don't want to do that with the second. And I'm not just talking about sleep, I'm talking about everything. So you are probably a little bit more inclined to read a little bit more. There is, unfortunately, quite a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of research cited that is not applicable to children. So I'd be very mindful of that when you're reading. Again, opinion pieces that link to research about something, follow the research, click on the link, see what it's about. Don't just take it as read that that is, you know, that's gospel. But at the same time, try not to overwhelm yourself, because every baby is different and what you read might not correlate with where the situation you find yourself in once the baby's here. We try to make all of our information at Little Dreams as accessible and easy to read as possible, because everybody's tired. Like, we find even with our sleep plans, I'm not, like, we go through them over Zoom with the family, but then I'm like, I'm going to send it to you. You need to read it again, because I'm very aware that you are absolutely exhausted. So taking it in needs to be in a really kind of easy to follow way. And our blogs are written like that as well, so we try to sort of write them in a way that's quick and snappy and everybody gets the information they need and an easy way to digest it. Our Instagram, we have like top tips, so and we have links to our blogs and things, so it just tries to break it down a little bit rather than being like, here's everything that was ever written by anybody on sleep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I like the fact that you use a lot of video content on your Instagram and things. So it's just somebody talking. So that's easy to take in, isn't it? Just quick, snappy, short bits of information. Because as you say, everybody's very tired that come to you. So let's talk a bit about your support and sleep packages. So you mentioned you've got the antenatal, and then does it go on baby, toddler, school?
So we again, we wanted to make our packages as easy to be accessible to people as possible, because there is a lot of sleep consultants out there will have, different levels of support with different add-ons that you can bolt on and things, and for us, we were like, people are really tired. Like, let's just make it as easy as possible. So we very basically have antenatal, which is actually aimed at pregnant couples, but we will sometimes do it for very, very newborn babies. But again, it needs to, in order for you to make the most out of an antenatal package, you need to kind of read it before you have the baby or in your very early days, and who's in reality, who's in that space when they've got a couple of week old baby. Then we have children in a cot, and then we have children in a bed. That's it. So if they're in a cot, we work with them until they're at least 2.5. So they need to be in a cot. If again, going back to when it might not be appropriate for us to work with the family, if they've made the decision to move a baby or a toddler into a bed before 2.5, we wouldn't work with them. They need to go back in a cot. Comes down to impulse control. I'm sure we'll probably talk about that, might come up in one of the questions later, but there's a reason for it. It's not just us going, well, we plucked an age out of thin air. They need to be in a cot until they're 2.5 at least, because they can't control their impulses before that point. That's another developmental leap they go through. So in terms of the cot package, that's designed for babies from 4 months to 2.5, and then the child in a bed package is from 2.5 to 10 years old, and that's like our sort of upper age limit.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so a little bit about now the impact of Little Dreams. So obviously you've helped so many families. What's the most rewarding part of this for you? I'm guessing the child sleeping and happy families, but yeah.
Yeah. Making a real difference to families. I was speaking to somebody this morning about why I made the leap, and I've always wanted to help people. Like, it sounds cliche, but that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with families and help people. I grew up in a family where my mum ran a charity, children and families charity. It's been in my kind of blood forever. So I knew I wanted to help people, but I didn't know. I think it was very difficult for me initially to walk away from social work because it was my professional identity. But I really genuinely feel like I'm actually helping people now. And I also know it's the best thing for me is, and this sounds a bit weird, but when I'm speaking to a crying mum on the phone who's like, I don't know, I can't carry on like this, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, I can help you. And in 2 weeks, you're going to be in so much of a different place. And I know that, and I 100% believe that. So I can say that with absolute, I know it to be true. So for me, that's the best thing, is that I can go, I hear you. It's really hard. It's going to be okay. Like, and know that that's true. and seeing the difference that makes to families. You know, I've worked with parents who openly have said, you know, we're on the verge of separating, like we can't carry on like this, and seeing them go on to have more children when they've said we're not having any more babies, like absolutely not, can't go through this again. You know, that's what makes the difference. And just knowing that you can make that difference is just amazing, you know. So I think that's the best part for me.
And I bet as well, as you said, so 100% sure that in 2 weeks their life will be different. I bet that's kind of like you're just desperate to kind of work with them and say, come on, let's do this. I can help you out.
I know, and parents will often say, what's your success rate? And I'm like, if you work with me or us and you do what I ask you to do, and you're honest with me, and we, you know, everybody follows the plan, it's 100%. The only reason it wouldn't work is if you said after X amount of time we don't want to do it anymore. That's the only reason, and it's very few and far. I can't even probably count on. I've worked with, oh God, we were trying to count it up the other day, hundreds and hundreds of families. I mean, the Little Dreams network's over 1,200 now that we've worked with. I don't know personally how many I am of that, but quite a lot. And I can probably count on one hand, maybe slightly two, that where it's not worked, and that's only been because the family has made a conscious decision that they want to go back to what they were doing before. But yeah, other than that, I've had some amazing reviews. Like I've got one framed in my office that says it says it's from a dad, and it says, oh, I think I can see it from here. So something along the lines of, Faye is one of the most amazing people we've ever met, and we only knew her for 2 weeks. She's a effing rock star. And if you just do what she says, basically something like that. And I've just got it framed in a speech bubble in my office because I'm it's quite nice to be called that. But B, it's like I was only there for 2 weeks. It's not like I'm, you know, a lifelong thing in there. That they've done it in the nicest possible way. When we finish working with a client, I'm like, I don't really want to say keep in touch, because if you are keeping in touch, it's probably because sleep's gone out the window again. So, you know, we've got lovely clients who follow us on Insta and our biggest supporters. And I was going to say earlier, you know, a lot of there it is a bit of a taboo subject, but a lot of referrals that we get, most of the referrals we get are word of mouth, because parents will, you know, they'll speak to their group that they went to antenatal classes with, or, you know, that they go to mum and toddler group with, or whatever it is, and they're like, and a lot of other businesses that we speak to, that we collaborate with, will say, oh my God, sleep is the only thing that parents talk about when they come to our group. That's what they talk about. And then if one of them starts getting sleep, very quick to pass that around. So yeah, just knowing that you've got that, that you make that impact on people in such a short space of time. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that's amazing. So you mentioned that you typically say 2 or 3 weeks with a family. What does support look like? So they'd have their initial questionnaire and chat with you, and then how does that look over the 2 weeks?
So we do the majority of our consults are done online because it came from COVID. We had to go online. We grew massively during COVID. That's when we decided to franchise, because COVID was so mental for us. And we went online with our consults because we had to, and actually since then the feedback from parents has been that they prefer it online because they can fit it into their day. It's like dad can zoom in from the office, you know, again, I'm making generalizations there, you know, anyone can zoom in from anywhere. So it fits better for people. We do still offer some in-house consults if parents really want that, but our standard package is via Zoom. And then we support them for 2 or 3 weeks depending on the package. And that would look like daily phone calls, and email support as well if they need it. But the main thing that really gets us where we need to be is that they fill in live sleep logs for us. So every day they're filling in logs that we've all got access to, as in the client and the parents and whichever sleep consultant you're working with have access to, and you fill it in literally step by step throughout the day. Nap time, what time they wake up from a nap, what time they go down for the next nap, what happened during the night, bedtime, all of this stuff. It's very easy. Again, we make it as easy as possible so that parents aren't having to like think too much because everyone's tired. But that information is what allows us to analyze everything, to make the tweaks throughout those 2 weeks to get to where we need to be at the end of the 2 weeks.
Brilliant. So will you make a tweak depending on the night, if or you?
Yeah, so we tend to speak to the family the following day, maybe in the morning, or if we're slightly later into the plan and the nights have improved, but we're working on the naps, we might say, right, let's speak later in the day, see how naps have gone, make some tweaks for the next day for naps and so on. And there'll be some families who make the tweaks in the first couple of days, suddenly sleep gets better, and we don't really speak to them very much because they're like, we're all right, we know what we're doing. And there'll be other families that we speak to every single day, because they need that level of support, and that's fine. Which is why we didn't do the kind of bolt on to packages, because actually you just need to know you've got it there if you need it. And that's what we do. If it's a school age child, it's obviously 3 weeks, and the addition that we do in those 3 weeks is that we work with the child. So we meet the child and we try where as much as possible to do that in person. So we would do an in-house visit for that family if there was a child. If we couldn't because they were too far away, then we'd do it via video message. But we definitely want them to understand who we are so that they don't feel like something's being done to them. It's happening with them. And they've got some say and some autonomy in that. So yeah, we'll do like either, FaceTime with them every few days, or if they're a bit too shy to do that, we'd send video messages to the child, like saying like, how well done they've done, or like giving them some tips on how they can, maybe do a little bit better the next night. So yeah, that's another thing we do for school age children.
I love that. I love that you include the child as well. I think that's really, really important.
It wouldn't work. I mean, some children will not engage very well with that because they're a bit shy, and that's fine. But normally what happens is even if they are a bit shy, they still love the videos, so they won't come and talk to us. Like, they don't want to talk to us, but they'll watch the videos. And I've had pictures sent to me of like little ones sitting there watching my video over and over again. But they won't talk to me. But they'll tell everybody else that they've got a lady that they're working with called Faye who's helping with me with my sleep and stuff. So yeah, it's lovely.
And you do kind of a bit like, as you say, you really congratulate them, really reward them, that type of thing if they've done well.
So, but positive reinforcement. It's not that we don't punish children. Like, it wouldn't work. It's a behavioral approach. So there are there are strategies that we put in place that kind of reward them for things, and maybe consequence, not like in a punishment type of way, but just in a looking at any behaviors that we maybe want to modify slightly, and we'll look at how we can kind of push them more towards the reward than anything else. But yeah, it is a marathon and not a sprint. It is a 3-week process, so there's a lot to think about during those 3 weeks, because like I say, we'll get to I'm working with a 5-year-old at the moment who we are nearly at the end of 3 weeks, and they've only slept through the night the last 3 nights. So that shows how long it's taken to get to that point, and that's normal. And I've had the parents on the phone to me saying, "Oh, what are we doing wrong?" And I'm like, "You're not doing anything wrong. Like, this is how long it takes." And now suddenly they're like, I had a message saying she did it, like really excited, and I was like, okay, let's see if she can do it again. And she did do it again, and we're now, there'll be bumps in the road, but she can do it now. So we're there, but it's taken that amount of time.
And is that the aim, to get the child to sleep through the night? Is that what you're?
It A, depends on their age, B, depends on the parents' goals. So we would never say that it's realistic or that you should expect to have a baby that's not established on solids to sleep through the night. So if we had a parent come to us with a 6-month-old and say, my goal is I want them to sleep through the night, we'd be saying that's not realistic. It might happen, but it's not realistic, because they might genuinely be hungry, and you need to feed them. If we had a 2.5-year-old who was waking up 3 or 4 times a night, which I have had quite a lot of, for milk, we'd be looking at, right, okay, so how can we move the bulk of their calorie intake to the day? Because generally when you've got a toddler who's waking up a lot for milk during the night, it might be that their parents might describe them as a fussy eater during the day, but actually what's happening is they're getting quite a lot of food at night, so they're not as hungry during the day. So then, yes, realistically, they can sleep through the night without waking up for a feed. But how do we do that would depend on lots of different things. But yeah, especially the older they get, and the more aware they get of things. So yeah, like for instance, this little 5-year-old that I'm working with now, 100% habit, like towards like the latter part of this plan, where she, to start off with, she'd wake every hour, and she'd be really cross every hour, and then it got to the point where we were 2.5 weeks in, and she was still waking a couple of times a night, but literally waking. Mum would take her back to bed. I mean, there's a lot that's happened in the process in the run up to this point. And she'd just go straight back to sleep. And she'd only be doing it. It was just like she woke up and she was like, she hadn't even really thought about it. She just got up and went in. She wasn't upset. She wasn't cross. She just was like, well, I'm awake, so I'll go in and find Mum and then I'll come back. So yeah, definitely habit at a certain age. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, that's brilliant. So for families listening at home, how do they know that it's time to reach out for help? Like, what would you say is the
If you find it's unsustainable, I don't think there's a right and wrong. I speak to families. I think, again, another misconception about sleep consultants is that we want to fix everybody and we want to change everybody. We don't. Like, I've got friends who co-sleep. I've got a very good friend who's got 3 children who are just school age and under, and they've got a California king bed. They all sleep in the bed together, and it works for them. Like, great. And she always laughs to me. She's like, "Oh, you think what I do is silly." I'm like, I like, you're all well rested, you're all sleeping, as long as you're doing it safely, like, whatever works for you. We're here if things aren't sustainable, and there's no judgment. You can have a call with us and decide after speaking to us, I don't actually think that's the right thing, and we might even say it's not the right time for you. But we're here and we can help, and just to take that step to ask for the help, I think. And if we can help with a bit of a tweak, like, if I speak to a family and it's very obvious to me on the phone that there's just something they need to do to probably shift things, and that might be enough to fix the problem, then I'll give them that advice. But most of the time parents come to us and they're like, what we need is somebody to support us through it. Yeah.
like inspiration kind of? Yeah. Okay. So I've got a question here as well. What advice would you give to parents with multiple children who have got different sleep needs? So I guess that was a bit like you when you had your 2.
Yeah. So my first port of call for everybody is, don't be afraid to ask for help. And I'm not talking about from a sleep consultant. And I know it's not that easy for some people, and some people don't have the family around to help them. But if you do and you are able to, then don't be afraid to ask for help. If your husband is home from work, again, I'm generalizing there, but if it's that way around or the other way around, try and divide and conquer, so that one of you does one and one of you does the other. If you're at that age where, there's only really if you've got a baby and a much older child, then there's going to be a bit of a difference. But generally you can work a bedtime routine for 2 children at the same time. It may be that one needs slightly longer at the other end of the other end of the bedtime routine, a bit more time reading because they're not quite ready to go to sleep, or if they're a bit older. But generally you can do a bedtime routine at the same time. But ask for help to get that established if you're struggling, so that you've got an extra pair of hands. In terms of if you've got children that are on vastly different schedules, let's say you've got a I don't know, like a 6-month-old and a 5-year-old, for instance, then you will, and you haven't got anybody around to help you, then you're going to have to try and give that 5-year-old a little bit of independence. And by that I don't mean like, leaving them to their own devices for a long period of time, but you could do the bedtime routine together. They could maybe have a bath together if they wanted to, and then the 5-year-old can go into their room and maybe do a bit of quiet playtime, or read some, look through some books or magazines or whatever it is, while you deal with the younger one. Try not to, if you can, make a baby overtired by stretching them to meet the needs of the older child, if that makes sense. Like, they're going to struggle with that, and it's going to end up in a lot more tears. So prioritizing getting the baby down when it needs to go down, and encouraging, either getting a bit of help with the older child, or encouraging, if they're old enough, for them to have a little bit of independence in terms of being close by, but not allowing you to put the baby to bed, rather than going, well, the child doesn't need to go to bed till, I don't know, like 8, and I'm going to keep the baby up until 8. Probably going to end in tears.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I guess at that age as well, they're quite willing to try and help. So if you can include them in trying to help, as you say, it's quite a nice thing having a bath together, maybe reading a story to the baby and that type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I think there's my daughter was 3.5, maybe not 3.5, 3 when my son was born, and yeah, there was a lot of that. She really wanted to help, but then there was a point where it was not helpful when she was quite hyperactive, and I was trying to get him down, and I was like, just shush, you need to be shush now. And I think we find that a lot. So definitely, if you've got the opportunity of having another pair of hands just for that moment when you're trying to put them down, with the older child, then that can be really helpful. We've got a blog actually, and I'll give you all the contact details for our website, but there's a blog on handling bedtime with 2 children. So oh God, I can't even speak now. Like solo bedtime with more than one child, because I do it a lot. I've always had to do it a lot. And Becky, who kind of works for us in Bristol, her husband works away a lot, so she's had to do it. Jenna, her husband, works away a lot. She's got 3 children, so she's had to do it. So again, we've got that hands-on experience of knowing how to juggle.
Yeah, and I'll link the blog post below to that one. What else have I got here? Okay, this is an interesting one. How can parents stay consistent with the sleep plan when life gets busy or routines get disrupted, holidays, illnesses, etc.?
Yeah, I would say that holidays and illness are probably the 2 biggest bumps in the road. That and starting nursery are probably the biggest 3. In terms of holiday, there's 2 trains of thought really with holiday. One is that you're on holiday, so you just go with the flow, and then you get things back on track when you come home. Fine. Or there's the train of thought of we're going to try and stick to pretty much our routine at home. There isn't really an in between. It's kind of like and you either kind of try to stick, and that doesn't mean that you're stuck in a hotel room or a villa. You can do naps on the go. You can use a pram with maybe a snooze shade over the top to make it darker if it's very light and sunny. But giving them the opportunity to sleep when they normally would, will keep their body clock on the same rhythm, and it shouldn't be too disruptive. Or you take the other train of thought, which is like, we're on holiday, we're going to accept that when we get home things are going to be a bit tough for a few days, and we'll get back into the swing of it. Again, I mean, there's no right or right. It depends on your parenting style and what you want to do, but there's not what you can't do is kind of expect them to not become overtired if you just throw all sleep out the window. They're not robots. They will still get tired when they are used to being tired. So you will see more tears. You might see more kind of tantrums from a toddler. All of those things. So if you are very precious about your sleep, which obviously a lot of our clients are, because they've made the call to make the changes and they then don't want that to unravel, then I would just suggest trying to stick to a very basic routine as you would at home, but obviously doing naps out and about. If you're on holiday, you're not just going to want to sit in a hotel room, and that's fine. If your illness is slightly different, because obviously all of us will respond quickly to our children if they're poorly, and that's fine. And often I'll say to parents, if they need extra feeds during the night because they're poorly, absolutely give them extra feeds during the night. Just don't go back to doing what you used to do. So if, for instance, you've always rocked them to sleep, and then you got out of that habit and you're now onto everyone's getting more sleep, and the baby's sleeping, having more consolidated sleep, then don't go back to doing that just because they're ill. Like, obviously give them more reassurance, give them an extra cuddle, extra feed if they need it, Calpol if they need it, whatever they need. If they need you to go and sleep on a mattress in their room next to them so you can see them, do it. But just don't go back to doing what you did before. Don't take them into your bed. Like, keep it at their sleep space is their sleep space. You go in and sleep with them. You can get yourself out of that when they're better. It's very difficult to move a toddler out of a bed of your bed when they've been in there for 2 weeks. I think it's quite nice. So yeah, just kind of with illness, just getting things back on track, doing what you need to do during the illness, but not going back to what you did before. And then with nursery, which is the other biggest kind of one that we see, it's tough. Like, again, you've got to ride it out because it's a big change for them. Like, going to nursery, they're going to miss you. They're going to want more time with you. When are they going to get that time? Probably at the end of the day when it's bedtime. So if you can, easing them into nursery is great, because doing shorter days to start off with, even just for the first week, so that they've got that time at the end of the day to kind of reconnect with you, as it were, so they're not looking for that time at bedtime or in the night. Nurseries Most nurseries that I've come across are pretty good at getting children to sleep. They're quite, like, a lot of magic witchcraft that happens at nursery. um, and accept that things might be slightly different to how they are at home, and that's probably the reality of nursery. They've got a lot of children to get to sleep. But asking them to stick to your timings is key. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that something you would suggest, if, because nursery have nap time at a certain time, if you say these are my timings, I'm sure that they would.
I've only ever come across a handful of nurseries who have a vastly different routine to what I would expect for that age child. So, mostly when you've got a 12, 14-month old, for instance, then the nurseries will be putting them down for a nap after lunch. I've had a few very rare nurseries who are like, well, we've got a very different sleep policy where we'll let the child sleep when they're showing signs of being tired. That could be problematic if you've got a little one that, because yes, they're going to be knackered at nursery. It's completely new. That's so stimulating. They're going to be like, probably after an hour, they're going to be like, but then it's very quick to unravel if you then start putting a child down for a nap at a completely random time to what they've usually been napping at. It will affect their sleep pressure throughout the day. So most nurseries are brilliant, and they just put little ones to sleep when they at the appropriate time for their age. But you can absolutely ask nurseries to cap naps. Like, if you've got a, I don't know, a 2.5-year-old who needs to start thinking about dropping their nap because they're finding it really difficult to fall asleep at bedtime, or they've started waking up really early in the morning, for instance, then you can absolutely say to nursery, like, I don't want them to sleep for any more than an hour and a half, please, like, for instance. And they should do that. Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, that's brilliant. I've got a note here about the future of Little Dreams. So have you got any exciting plans, new services on the horizon, anything coming up for Little Dreams?
Are always exciting plans. So we are in a really exciting, it's really exciting at the moment. We've just had our training course approved by the Association of Professional Sleep Consultants, which is really exciting because we're the only UK course to be approved. So that means that all the consultants that come through and are buy a Little Dreams franchise, they not only have a we're BFA accredited, so our business model has been approved by the British Franchise Association, but also the sleep training course for the consultant is also approved by the Association of Professional Sleep Consultants. So that's really exciting because, like I say, it will only be the only way you can do that in the UK is via a course that's approved. And that's if you want to go down the Association of Professional Sleep Consultants route, we're the only ones in the UK that have that accreditation, which is really exciting. We are growing. We've got a new franchisee about to start in the next month, which is really exciting. So we're looking to kind of continue to grow, really, in terms of what our mission statement is, so that everybody can get a good night's sleep, and we want to do that by growing our network of highly trained sleep consultants across the UK. We have other packages as well that are relatively new. So we have our Better Sleep for Children package, which is a schools program. So we offer a combination of seminars that are delivered to parents and teachers around sleep. So it's again, I can give you the link to that. So that's brilliant, because that's, again, for parents who maybe don't need like the intense support of like a 2 or 3 week program, but they just want some advice on what to expect, and that's aged, obviously, aimed at school age children. We do corporate seminars, so we offer like lunch and learns to companies who might buy in a seminar for their employees to log into during their lunch break, whatever. And that's very much based on, we have various different age brackets for that. So we do, babies or toddlers or older children. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can help families. It's not just working intensely for those 2 to 3 weeks. That is the majority of work that we do, but we absolutely have kind of touch points for people who might just need a little bit of advice rather than full on support.
Absolutely. And I think that's really good as well, about like spreading the word and people, getting, because people sometimes might think, oh, sleep consultant's really expensive and hard to get and this and that. And if you're going to these seminars, or if hubby sees it at work or you see it at work and things like that, it's just having that knowledge. I think that's really amazing. Okay, my final question that I've got here is, how do you stay updated on the latest? Because I guess this research is always changing and there's always new things happening. How do you, as a sleep consultancy, stay updated?
So again, this is another thing that we're really passionate about at Little Dreams, because we want it, because of the backgrounds that Jenna and I come from, we wanted to be evidence-based. We wanted to be credible, and we don't want to just take on board every opinion that's out there. It needs to be backed up by the research. So both of us are members of the British Sleep Society and the British Paediatric Sleep Society. So we have a lot of access to the most up-to-date medical guidelines in terms of sleep, which then we pass on to our franchisees in terms of anything that's relevant. We also are very lucky because we have Professor Michael Gradazar, who is one of the leading pediatric sleep experts in the world. He teaches on our course. So he's amazing, and has conducted a lot of research in conjunction with other specialists in the field as well. So we're members of his community, if you like. So we have access, as do all of our franchisees, to his wealth of, and again, he's brilliant because he makes things really accessible. So you can understand, like, he's got the research, but then he'll write a blog about that research so that people can understand it, and it's his research or research that he's critiqued, and then he'll make it very easy read for anybody else. So even us who are in the sleep world, a lot of the medicalized research is obviously quite full on heavy, so it's really helpful to have that. And he, like I say, teaches on our course, so all of our franchisees have access to that as well as part of their training program.
I guess anyone coming to you can rest assured that this is a fully researched and accredited course that these franchisees have been on, so they are getting.
Yeah, exactly. So we wanted to make it credible from the business perspective as well as the sleep perspective. So we've done everything we can to ensure that both of those two boxes have been ticked, if you like. And then from Jenna and I's point of view as founders, we strive to stay really current with everything that's going on, obviously, and all franchisees, especially in your first year, are really heavily supported by both of us. So if there's stuff, we will make sure that we are kind of, and we have a conference every year, so we have a roundup every year of all the research that's relevant to us, and we talk about that in our conference. We've got the franchisees that we've got at the moment loved the conference so much that they asked for like a mini conference, so we're having like a 6 monthly mini meet, we're calling it. We haven't really come up with anything more snappy than that, but that's going to be very much looking at like what's happened maybe in the sleep world, and then we'll talk about tricky clients or tricky problems that they are coming across regularly, and we'll kind of do all of that. So yeah, there's a lot of support that's backed up by the evidence and research for all of our sleep consultants.
And I guess if some of the sleep consultants, that perhaps newer consultants, they can always ask you and approach you and Jenna if they have any issues with particular clients or any questions and things like that. So they've got that support as well.
Yeah, so in their first year especially, like I say, it's not just we do our initial week of training and then you're on your own. You have literally weekly support from me. So I run it's called a clinic. I think it harps back to my social work days, where first years book in every week and they come and talk to me about the clients that they've got, and we'll talk about it. We have a forum on our CRM system, so everybody can, if it's not an emergency, they can be like, oh, I'm having, like, what does everybody think? I've tried this. Has anybody tried this before? Like, talks. We can all support each other. They have monthly big sort of half day meetings with Jenna around their business development and their marketing. I observe all of their clients until they're confident. So I come with them I sit on Zoom with them and go through that. I have access to all their sleep logs, so I can see exactly what's going on. So yeah, it's really, really intense, so that we know that the quality that's coming out is there to meet what the clients need for them to be successful, really.
Absolutely, yeah, and for everybody to get more sleep and be happy. Right, so I mentioned earlier, I've popped some questions on our Instagram, and we've had quite a lot of people put their questions. So if that's okay, I'll run through those now from our parents at home. So the first one was, what's the best bedtime routine for a toddler who refuses to go to sleep?
Okay, first of all, I would look at are they napping in the day, and if so, how old are they? If they're over 2.5, then you probably need to start thinking about getting rid of the nap. If they're under 2.5 and they're napping for a long time, they may need to have their nap capped, as we just talked about. If they're not napping, probably putting them to bed earlier is going to help. So again, another misconception is that parents will say, well, if I keep them up later, they'll sleep in later. No. The more overtired you are, the less likely you are to be able to go to sleep. And that's the same for us. You know, if you think if we are really overtired and we've had a really busy day, then we don't normally just get into bed and go like dead to the world. And if we do, we often then have quite a restless night once we've had that sort of deep chunk. So actually putting little ones to bed a little bit earlier can be really helpful to curb that overtiredness. But I would say for a toddler, you want to look first at the nap, because generally the nap is having an impact on bedtime by that age if they're noticing problems. But a good bedtime routine for any age, baby or child, is, you know, a bit of decompression at the start. So make it nice and cozy, you know, start it downstairs, turn the screens off, like keep screens away for an hour before bed at least. Nice hand-eye coordination activities for 10-15 minutes. So if they're older children, that can be colouring or craft or Lego. If they're babies, that can be, you know, having a kick around on their mat, or maybe having like stacky cups, or you know, those books, like the tactile books. Toddlers, maybe some Play-Doh or something, you know, anything. Hand-eye coordination is brilliant for relaxing the brain at that time of the day. So just 10-15 minutes of that. Then you can go upstairs or wherever your bathroom is. If you don't bath every day, then make sure you wash hands and face, because it's something different to the rest of the day. So it can be really useful for like the body to recognize, okay, we're kind of stepping into the bedtime routine. Then into their bedroom for the last story of the day. If they have a feed at that point, they can have their feed then, and then do the story after the feed, and then pop them down after that. So they've had like probably at least 45 minutes to an hour of like decompression, relaxation up to bedtime. You can speed it up if you need to, if they're really tired, but still do all those little steps.
And would you say doing it always in the same routine every night so they kind of realize that it's sleep time?
Yeah, so we always say do all the steps, because otherwise, especially toddlers, feel like they're having the rug ripped from under them. So and also toddlers don't tend to like transitioning between activities. If they're really into something and you're like, well, we're going to bed now, they're like, what? It's not, no, we're not, don't want to do that. So always giving them like a little pre-warning. So 2 more minutes of doing this and then we're going to go in the bath. 2 more minutes in the bath and we're going to get out. One more story and then we're going to bed. Like always sort of preempting the next step. But if you're noticing massive kickback with bedtime, it's probably linked to the nap as well.
Nah. Okay. The next one is, how do I manage night wakings when my baby just wants to be held?
Again, it depends on the age of the baby. If they're newborn, then it's really normal for them want to be held, like they've come out of a very warm environment and they've been close to you. So it's really normal for a newborn. If you've got an older baby who's still wanting to wake up to be held in the night, it's probably because they're reliant on that being held to be able to go back to sleep. So really it comes down to working on not holding them at the beginning of the sleep, so that then when they wake up, they're not then reliant on being held again. So that might be something that you want to maybe, it can take a little bit of unpicking, because that's a slightly more than a little adjustment to make, because it's quite a big change for them. But also if they want to be held, again, it really does depend on the age of the baby, because if they're newborn or very young and they want to be held, or they particularly want to be upright or not on their back, then we would always recommend, as a first point of call, just speaking to your health visitor or GP about any possible reflux, because some babies who really don't like being put down on their back, it's because of that can cause it. Not always, but it's just something to be ruled out for sure.
Okay. When is the right time to move my child from a cot to a bed?
at least 2.5. Don't do it any earlier. Longer if you can. 3 would be perfect. And I think I touched on it before, but I'll talk about it now. The impulse control just isn't there before then. So I'll speak a lot to parents who will say, well, you had to put the toddler had to go into a bed because we needed the cot for the baby. Buy another cot. It's honestly not worth it, because they can't control their impulses. So they will get out of bed because they can. Like, that is how toddlers learn. They learn by doing. They learn through repetition. So if they do something, and learn that they can, that, oh, I can get out of bed, I can go and find mummy or daddy, they'll do it because they can. So until they can learn to control those impulses, which doesn't happen until they're between 2.5 and 3, they will do it, and there's nothing you can do to stop that from happening. The only time I would say you would have to consider doing it earlier is if they are cot jumping and they're doing it unsafely. That's a real tricky situation to be in. I wish I could like wave a magic wand, but if you've got a cot jumper and you have to put them in a bed, often it's a case of riding it out until they're old enough to control their impulses, and then you can look at implementing some sort of like behavioral approach around that.
When should I stop using a dummy for sleep?
So dummies are they're a double-edged sword, dummies. So the Lullaby Trust recommends that if you introduce a dummy as a newborn, and the baby takes it, that you keep it for sleep until they're at least 6 months. The reason for that is because there has been some research to suggest that there is a link between dummies and a reduction in the risk of SIDS. Having said that, you can't guarantee a baby's going to take a dummy. My unicorn baby never took one. I wanted her to have one because she had quite bad wind, and although she was an amazing sleeper, she was quite unsettled sometimes because of it. And I was like, oh, maybe a dummy would help her. She would absolutely not take it. No way. My son took a dummy from day one and loved it. Again, no rhyme or reason for it. So you can't guarantee a baby is going to take a dummy. If they've taken it, the guidance is that after 6 months you remove it for oral health reasons, and obviously for older children, language development as well. We would recommend from a sleep perspective that if you've introduced one, after 6 months we would remove it for sleep, because what happens is they rely on it, and there are some very few babies, they do exist, who a dummy will drop out of their mouth in the night, and A, they won't be worried about it and they don't care, or B, they can sort of roll around until they find it and pop it back in themselves. Very few and far can do that. Normally what happens is they wake up looking for the dummy, you have to go back in and find it and put it back in, and by the time you've done that, you're doing that 4, 5, 6 times a night. It can get quite tiresome. So we would remove it from 6 months.
Okay. My child only falls asleep in the car or the pram. How do I break that habit?
Again, making sure the awake windows are right, because often what happens is parents will struggle to get them down in the cot because their awake window is wrong, or they are just really overtired because they're maybe not a particularly great sleeper overnight. They cry a lot, and then parents resort to a pram nap, completely understandably. And then you find yourself in a pattern where you're like, well, it's just the way they sleep. I know that they'll sleep in the pram. So cot naps very much come down to practice. You've got to give them the opportunity to nap in the cot at the right time, and be really consistent with it, and get dad involved. If mum finds it hard, which again I'm generalizing, but tends to be, we do find it slightly harder, then get dad to try and do it, and see. And again, trying to avoid that feeding just before a nap is key as well. We want them to go down fully awake, like you said, so that they're aware of where they are, so that when they do fall asleep they don't feel that sort of disorientation when they wake up. But yeah, just practice really, and practice but without giving yourself a hard time. So maybe commit to trying for the first nap of the day in the cot every day, because the first nap tends to be the easiest for babies to achieve because they haven't been overly stimulated. They find it they've got a bit of a kind of hangover of sleep that they can call on if they want to from the night. It's not so it gets slightly less easy during the day as it goes on, for them to be able to switch off and fall asleep. So maybe commit to having the first nap at home in the cot, and then subsequent nap, if you found first nap really hard, go out for the second nap, and do that on the go. But yeah, looking at the basics first in terms of awake windows and things is really key.
Okay. And what are your views on kind of transferring from the pram to the cot? Is that
If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, i.e. the baby just wakes up, it's probably worth trying to get them in the cot at the beginning of the nap. We would always, when we work with families, we always do naps in the cot, and we put in lots of strategies around how to achieve that. You know, a lot of parents will be like, in reality, we can do one nap at home, but the other one's got to be on the go because we're coming back from X, Y, or Z, or we've got to go and pick the other child up from school, or whatever it is. So there will be times where you'll probably want them to sleep in the pram or the car, but trying to make it at the right time is key, not letting them just fall asleep willy-nilly throughout the day, because it will have an impact later on. And this goes back to, again, why we ask for parents to have that 2-week period, because we will be saying to parents, you can't do that. You can't go out during the day to, the supermarket in the middle of the day. You're going to have to time it so that you go when they're fully awake, because we need to get on top of their overtiredness, and we need to get them into a good routine. And then when you're in a good routine, you'll know when your awake windows are, and you'll be able to go out and go to a class or go swimming or go to the shops, whatever it is. And they'll be nice and alert, and then they'll be ready to go back to sleep when you get home for the next nap.
okay? And is there a time in the day where you'd say no naps past this point, obviously after a certain age?
It depends on the age again of the child, because a baby can nap much later in the day than a toddler, for instance. I wouldn't let a toddler nap. Absolute latest, sort of 2:30, 3 o'clock would be my latest danger nap. We've got a blog on that as well. But a baby can sleep later. Depends on the age. Once you get to sort of 4 months plus, then ideally we don't really want them to be asleep much later than sort of 4:30, because it does, especially in the winter now, it's going to be dark. The body starts to produce melatonin when it's dark, so you don't want it to sort of get into a habit where you're like using the fourth nap or the third nap, if it might be, as like a early bedtime, and then by bedtime they're like, well, I'm not tired, like I've had my sleep. So it's good to keep it on keep a good awake window before bed.
Okay, that sounds good. And that brings us on nicely to the last question that we had. The clocks are changing soon. My little one's in a great routine. Help.
Yeah. Okay, so I will link you the blog for this, because it's easy to make the tweaks if you know how. But yeah, very basically, I'll send you a link, and you can read through it. Yeah, because it's there are things you can do to kind of mitigate it, but it does depend on the age, and the blog's broken down into ages of like how to do it, so it does very much depend. Probably take me quite a long time to go through each age of what, so I'll send you the link, because that's really, really helpful for parents. I will have loads of information on our Insta around it in the run up to it, because I'd say it's probably the main question at this time of year that parents are like, so yeah.
Oh, perfect. So, yeah, I'll link that below. That's everything on my list. Thank you so much. I've had such a great time. I've taken so much in. Things that I wish I'd have known 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's probably the other thing that we get told the most. I wish I'd known about you sooner.
So if we've got anybody at home that's like, right, I want to get in touch with Little Dreams, you'll give me all your details and I'll pop them below. Is it the best way to follow you on Instagram, and all your details are on there? And
Yeah, follow us on Instagram. Everything is on there. We will also like link to our website in the bio. But if you wanted to book a call with us, you can do that all via our website. There's a booking button that you can book a call, and that will take you to your nearest sleep consultant. So if you're kind of wherever you're based, it will take you to who your sleep consultant is in your area. and then you can book a call with them. We do like a free 15-minute call at the beginning to talk A, what's going on for your child, and B, whether we think we're the right fit for you. And then from then, if you wanted to go ahead and book, we'd get you booked in from that point. So that's just a free call that we offer everybody.
Oh, fabulous. And would it be worthwhile them keeping a bit of a log now if they're thinking of getting in touch?
Not really. That's something that parents often ask us. They say, "Oh, we've been tracking their sleep on this app. Should we forward you the app?" I'm like, not really, because we're going to start afresh. You've told me, the questionnaire will give us all the information that we need in terms of what the problems are. What we're going to do will vastly change everything. So our sleep logs will start from night one, and we'll then just work with what we've got then for those 2 weeks.
And do you recommend any of those apps or anything like that? So there's a lot out there, aren't there, tracking and...
No, not specifically. There is a lot. I think people would need to go and do their own research. I mean, it, there's lots of apps that do like feeding and sleep kind of tracking at the same time. Having a rough idea of your awake windows is always helpful. So that's something that even if you just kept a note on your phone or set an alarm on your phone to the end of the next awake window, so you know when to pop them down, because we're all busy and we get sucked into things. So just having a rough idea of the awake windows are really, I know I've said it a lot during this, but they are quite key to getting good sleep.
Brilliant. And we'll pop all those details down below. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. As I said, pop everything down below. And if anyone wants to get in touch, they can they can do so. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the chat.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.